Imagine waking up in a country overflowing with oil, gold, or rare minerals, wealth that could make you a global powerhouse. But instead, you're crushed under debt, sanctions, and economic chaos. This isn't bad luck, it's a deliberate pattern that's targeted resource-rich nations for centuries. And right now in 2026, with energy wars escalating, this should terrify you because your country could be next. Let me show you the exact 5-stage sequence that's destroyed empires before, and we're already deep into stage 3 globally. Stay with me, you need to see how this trap closes. This same ruthless 5-stage financial pressure sequence has toppled at least 3 major resource-dependent powers in living memory, and the pattern is crystal clear. First, the Spanish Empire in the 16th and 17th centuries. They conquered the New World, flooded Europe with mountains of silver and gold, became the richest nation on Earth overnight, and still went bankrupt 5 times in a single century. Endless wars, runaway inflation, foreign bankers owning their debt. The gold didn't save them, it damned them. Then Britain in the early 20th century. The empire on which the sun never set controlled the world's most valuable resources from India to Africa to the Middle East. Yet by World War II, they were so financially exhausted that they had to hand the keys of global power, and much of that resource wealth, straight to the United States. And most recently, the Soviet Union in the 1980s and early 90s, a superpower sitting on the planet's largest oil and gas reserves. Engineered price crashes, strategic sanctions, and massive borrowing later, the whole system imploded in less than a decade. This isn't theory. This isn't coincidence. These are documented economic records, declassified cables, central bank archives, and the cold math of resource dependency. And here's the part that should make the hair on the back of your neck stand up. Right now, in January 2026, we have already completed stages 1 and 2 of this exact sequence on a global scale. Nations like Venezuela, Nigeria, Angola, Iraq, even hints of pressure building in Saudi Arabia and Russia, they're all feeling the same squeeze that broke the previous giants. The brutal truth is this: abundant natural resources don't build lasting national wealth. They paint a massive target on your back. They invite predators who have spent centuries perfecting the art of turning your greatest strength into your fatal weakness, through finance. In the next few minutes I'm going to walk you through each of the 5 stages, step by step, exactly how they unfold, with the historical proof, and exactly where your country, yes, yours, sits in the sequence right now. Because understanding the pattern is the only way to see the trap before it fully closes. Let's begin with stage 1. Stage 1 always begins the same way. It starts with a gift from the earth that feels like divine favor. Take Spain in the early 1500s. Columbus opens the door. Then Cortez. Then Pizarro. Within decades, the silver mines of Potosi and Zacatecas are pumping out more precious metal than Europe had seen in 1,000 years combined. Mountains of silver. Literal mountains. Spain becomes the superpower of its age overnight. The king is the richest man who ever lived. The empire stretches across 4 continents. But here's what nobody tells you: the resource curse doesn't begin with collapse. It begins with euphoria that blinds you to the chains being forged around your economy. Because with all that silver flooding in, Spain stops making things. Why build factories when you can just buy everything from the Dutch, the Italians, the French, the English? Imports explode. Local industries wither. Prices skyrocket from the sudden flood of money, brutal inflation that destroys savings and wages. The crown, addicted to the easy wealth, spends faster than the mines can produce. They turn to foreign bankers, mostly in Antwerp and Genoa, to borrow against future shipments. And just like that, dependency is locked in. You're no longer a producer nation. You're an extraction and import nation. Your entire economy warps around one thing: digging it up and shipping it out. Any fluctuation in that single resource now threatens your survival. And the people who control global trade routes and banking? They suddenly control you. We just completed this exact stage in the modern world. Look at Guyana, 2015 to 2025. One of the largest offshore oil discoveries in a generation. GDP growth hits the stratosphere. The government promises schools, hospitals, roads, the works. But the pattern is repeating. Imports are surging, local agriculture and manufacturing are being neglected, foreign contractors and luxury goods flood in. The economy is now structurally hooked on oil exports while everything else is imported. One price drop, one blockade, one new technology shift, and the whole system becomes fragile. Your country could be doing the same thing right now, whether it's lithium in the lithium triangle, cobalt in the Congo, gas in Mozambique, or rare earths anywhere else. The discovery feels like winning the lottery. But the moment you reorganize your entire economy around that one jackpot, you've handed the keys to anyone who can manipulate that single price. Check. And once dependency is locked in, the predators don't need to invade. They just need to offer you a loan. Which brings us to stage 2, debt trap engineering. This is where it gets darker. Stage 1 locks you into dependency. Stage 2 is when the predators politely offer to help, and you sign away your future. Look at the British Empire at its supposed peak, late 1800s into the early 1900s. They controlled the world's most valuable resource colonies, Indian cotton, African gold and diamonds, Middle Eastern oil concessions waiting to be developed. But running an empire that large costs a fortune, wars, administration, infrastructure. So London turned to the rising financial power across the Atlantic, American banks, and to a lesser extent, European houses that had already bled Spain dry centuries earlier. They borrowed massively. Railways across India? Financed by British and American bonds. Gold mines in South Africa? More loans. Oil fields in Persia? Debt-financed concessions. The interest payments started flowing outward, year after year, decade after decade, siphoning real wealth back to the lenders while the empire looked powerful on the surface. Here's where it gets darker. The help you accept is the noose you tighten yourself. The loans always come with strings, subtle at first. Structural adjustments. Open your markets. Guarantee repayment with resource revenues. Allow foreign companies to operate your mines/oil fields. Miss a payment? Suddenly you're negotiating with creditors who demand control, asset sales, privatization, policy veto power. This is textbook debt trap engineering. And it works because the target nation is already addicted. They need the cash flow to keep the resource machine running, pay the soldiers, keep the elites happy. We are living through this stage right now, and it's global. Look at Angola after its oil boom, borrowed billions from China and Western institutions to build infrastructure on future oil revenues. Now the debt service eats huge chunks of oil income. Iraq, post-2003, reconstruction loans layered on top of war damage, with oil fields pledged as collateral in practice if not on paper. Nigeria, Ghana, Zambia, IMF programs demanding privatization of state oil/mining assets in exchange for breathing room on debt. Even Saudi Arabia quietly increased borrowing in the 2020s while oil markets were volatile. Your money, right now in 2026, is part of this machine. Every time your government takes another multilateral loan, another syndicated bond, another development package tied to resource access, the trap tightens another notch. We completed stage 1. We're deep inside stage 2 globally. And the interest is compounding. Check. The moment the debt burden becomes unbearable, the predators don't need tanks. They just need to turn your greatest asset into a liability, overnight. That's stage 3, market manipulation and price warfare. Let me show you how they do it. Stage 2 ties you with debt. Stage 3 is when they turn your greatest strength into a weapon aimed straight at your heart. The textbook modern case is the Soviet Union, late 1980s. Moscow sat on the world's largest proven oil and gas reserves, a geological fortress. Oil revenues were paying for almost everything: food imports, military spending, subsidies to keep the population quiet. Then, between 1985 and 1986, the price of oil collapsed, from over $30 a barrel to under $10 in real terms. One of the sharpest drops in history. How did it happen? Saudi Arabia, at the explicit encouragement of US geopolitical strategy, opened the taps, flooded the market. OPEC production surged while demand was soft. The real genius was turning your greatest asset into your biggest liability overnight. The Kremlin's foreign exchange earnings were cut in half almost instantly. They couldn't pay for grain imports. They couldn't service growing dollar-denominated debt. They had to borrow even more, at higher interest rates because creditors smelled blood. The downward spiral accelerated, more borrowing, more austerity, more internal resentment, until the whole system cracked open by 1991. This isn't ancient history. This is the same playbook, refined, digitized, weaponized. Right now in January 2026, we are solidly inside Stage 3 on a global scale. Russia, post-2022 sanctions turned European gas markets into a financial kill zone, pipeline flows weaponized, price caps imposed, alternative buyers punished with secondary measures. Revenues gutted despite high nominal prices at times. Venezuela, years of maximum pressure sanctions plus blocked access to markets plus frozen assets equals oil production and export income deliberately strangled. A country with the world's largest proven reserves reduced to begging for spare parts. Iran, Libya, even hints in Nigeria and Angola. Whenever a resource-rich state steps outside the approved financial architecture, the price environment suddenly becomes hostile. If your country relies heavily on exporting any single commodity, oil, gas, copper, lithium, cobalt, nickel, these price wars are eroding your future wealth as we speak. One coordinated flood, one new sanction layer, one green transition, narrative that crashes demand, and your budget implodes. Your taxes, your pensions, your currency stability, all become hostages to decisions made in boardrooms and ministries thousands of miles away. The trap is now so tight that financial stress alone starts doing the predator's work for them. Because when the money runs dry, people get angry. Elites get desperate. Society fractures. And that brings us to Stage 4, internal division and asset grab. This is where they don't have to invade. They just make you hand it over willingly. Let me show you how the fracture turns into surrender. Stage 3 starves the treasury. Stage 4 is when the hunger turns inward, and the predators finally collect. Go back to Spain in the 17th century. After decades of inflation, bankruptcies, and crushing debt service, the silver still flowed, but never enough. The crown raised taxes again and again. Local nobles and colonial governors squeezed harder. Inequality exploded. Revolts erupted, first in Catalonia, then Portugal broke away entirely, then bloody uprisings in the resource heartlands of Peru and Mexico. The empire was bleeding from within. Here's the brutal twist: they don't invade with armies. They make you hand it over willingly. Dutch and English merchants quietly funded rebel factions, supplied arms through back channels, bought up distressed colonial assets at fire sale prices. When the Spanish crown defaulted again in 1647 and 1662, foreign creditors stepped in with restructuring deals that quietly transferred trade monopolies and mining concessions to their companies. The Dutch West India Company and English privateers didn't conquer Spain. They harvested the pieces after financial stress tore it apart. Fast forward to the British Empire's endgame in the 1940s, 50s. War debt to the United States was astronomical. Colonial resource revenues couldn't cover it. Independence movements exploded. India, Malaya, Gold Coast, Kenya, fueled by economic desperation and inequality that decades of extraction had baked in. Britain, too weak to hold on militarily, was forced to negotiate decolonization under American financial pressure. The new independent governments inherited debt structures that kept resource flows pointed toward Western corporations and banks. This is unfolding right now, in real time, across multiple hotspots in 2026. The Democratic Republic of Congo, world's largest cobalt reserves, critical for batteries. Economic pressure plus massive debt plus corruption scandals equals endless militia conflicts funded from outside. Foreign mining giants quietly expand concessions while the government begs for IMF bailouts that demand more privatization. Sudan, Myanmar, even pockets in Nigeria and Mozambique, resource-rich zones where financial stress breeds corruption, inequality, and armed groups. When central governments weaken, outsiders don't send troops, they send stabilization funds, private military contractors, and sweetheart mining/oil deals to the winning faction. Your country, wherever you are watching this, if it's resource dependent, the math is already working against you. Rising living costs, falling real wages, elite capture of resource wealth, these aren't accidents. They're the predictable symptoms of stage 4. The more divided your society becomes under financial pressure, the easier it is for outsiders to step in and help, by taking control of the assets that started the whole cycle. And when the fracture is deep enough, when the government is too weak, too indebted, too unpopular, the final handover becomes inevitable. That's stage 5, total extraction and regime reset. This is where the trap snaps shut, and the cycle quietly restarts under new management. Stay with me. Stage 4 fractures the nation from the inside. Stage 5 is when the pieces are quietly collected, and the entire resource base is permanently reabsorbed into someone else's system. The clearest historical blueprint is the end of the British Empire after World War II. Britain was the world's greatest resource empire, but the war left them drowning in dollar-denominated debt to the United States. Lend-lease loans, wartime borrowing, reconstruction costs, the numbers were impossible. The 1946 Anglo-American loan was the final nail, massive funds in exchange for opening imperial markets, dismantling preferential trade, and accepting U.S. financial dominance. One by one, the resource jewels were pried loose. India gained independence but inherited debt and stayed tied to sterling area finance. African colonies decolonized under IMF/World Bank frameworks that ensured Western, and later American-led corporations kept control of mines, oil, plantations. The Middle East's oil concessions quietly shifted toward U.S. majors. Britain didn't lose the resources through conquest, they lost them through financial exhaustion and orderly regime reset. The new governments were independent in name only, the extraction pipelines simply rerouted to new owners. This is the stage where the trap snaps shut. You think the crisis is over when the old regime falls or reforms. But the cycle restarts, under new management. And we are now approaching this final stage in multiple places, right now in January 2026. Venezuela, after years of maximum pressure, production is a fraction of what it was, assets are distressed, and foreign interests, Russian, Chinese, Western vultures, circle for carve-ups under any future settlement. The Democratic Republic of Congo, cobalt and copper mines increasingly fall under multinational control via joint ventures. Forced by debt negotiations, the state keeps the flag. The profits leave. Even larger players feel the early tremors. Saudi Arabia's Vision 2030 borrowing binge, Russia's forced pivot to discounted sales, Iran's chronic isolation, all position them for eventual restructuring when the pressure becomes unbearable. The green energy transition accelerates everything. Lithium, nickel, rare earths, the new oil, are already seeing the same playbook: discovery, dependency, debt, price/manipulation, warfare, division, reset. Your resources won't disappear. They'll be reallocated to the tech giants, superpowers, and financial centers that run the global system. You'll be left with rebuilt infrastructure, in their image. New loans to service the old ones. A government that looks sovereign but signs the checks to foreign creditors. The pattern is complete. The handover is presented as progress, stability, reform. But the wealth flows in one direction, always upward, always outward. And once you reach stage 5, there is no going back without breaking the entire global financial architecture. Which is why the system was designed to be inescapable. Let me show you how fast it's accelerating, and who really benefits. Everything you've just seen isn't slowing down. It's accelerating, dramatically. Historical cycles took generations. Spain bled for over a century. Britain unraveled across decades. But today, Venezuela went from OPEC powerhouse to full humanitarian crisis in less than 15 years. Look at how quickly Sudan fractured after oil revenue collapsed. Or how fast Myanmar's resource economy was carved up once sanctions and debt bit deep. Digital finance, real-time sanctions enforcement, AI-driven market monitoring, And now climate policy weaponization. All these tools compress what used to take 50 to 100 years into 5 to 15. The green transition is the ultimate accelerator. Every EV battery, every wind turbine, every data center needs lithium, cobalt, nickel, copper, rare earths, the new strategic resources. Nations sitting on these deposits are being rushed through the exact same 5 stages at warp speed. Discovery booms are shorter. Debt piles up faster. Price manipulation is instantaneous. Division is amplified by social media and foreign funding. The reset? Already being negotiated in public-private partnerships and just transition. Funds that quietly transfer control. And here's the part that should freeze you in your seat. This system wasn't an accident. It was deliberately engineered, over centuries, by the interlocking architecture of central banks, multilateral institutions, and the world's largest multinational corporations. Bretton Woods in 1944 set the dollar as the global reserve. The petrodollar deal in the 1970s locked oil trade to dollars. IMF and World Bank structural adjustment programs became the enforcement arm. Today it's layered with swift exclusion threats, secondary sanctions, and ESG compliance that funnels capital away from non-compliant resource states. Who benefits? The same network at the top, always. Resource flows are redirected upward and outward. Debt service becomes permanent tribute. Sovereign nations are reduced to extraction nodes in a global machine that never stops. Right now, in January 2026, we are solidly in Stage 3 globally, with Stage 4 already burning in multiple countries and Stage 5 quietly being prepared in the background. Escape is impossible once dependency is locked in. The math is baked into the system. The only real question left is timing. How much longer until your country, or even the last holdouts, reach the final handover? Let me bring this home for you. The ultimate modern threat lands right at your doorstep. As energy wars intensify, EV mineral scrambles accelerate, and global shortages loom, even supposedly stable nations, Canada, Australia, Norway, are no longer immune. Your resources, your economy, your future, they're all in the crosshairs of the same 5-stage sequence that has never failed. Right now, in January 2026, we stand at the edge of Stage 4 globally, with Stage 5 already being quietly negotiated in the shadows of multiple capitals. The pattern doesn't care about exceptionalism. It doesn't care about your flag or your excuses. The math is merciless, and the clock is ticking faster than ever. The only question left is how much time you really have. If this just ripped the veil off the inescapable sequence that's targeting resource-rich countries, and showed you exactly where we stand on the edge of Stage 4 turning into Stage 5 right now in 2026, then hit that subscribe button. Because when the fracture deepens and the final handover begins, you'll want to be here for the exact playbook, what happens next, who moves first, and why the math never lies. The answers aren't hiding in tomorrow's headlines. They're already carved into the past. And I'll keep showing you precisely where to look. See you in the next one, before the next stage hits.